Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. We've recently launched our Patreon page, which can be found at cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon. If you aren't familiar with Patreon, it's an easy way for those who are interested in this show to help out by simply pledging a small amount each month in sponsorship. Now that could be as little as $5 a month, which is about £3.80, or as much as you like. You will enable us to dedicate more time creating more content to help you, including videos, more blog posts, and even more shows. So if you can, head over to cynicaldeveloper.com/Patreon and get involved. In this episode, we talk about Rookout with Or Weis, a new way to track bugs in your online applications. Or started with the computers at the age of 5 and went on to be a developer, an officer, and researcher at IDF Intelligence Elite Unit 8200. After his military service, he was a product architect at Intigua, founder and CTO of Reactful, consultant for the Ministry of Defence, and VP of R&D at Netline Communications Technologies Cyber Division. Or created Rookout along with Liran Haimovitch to resolve the pain of understanding production code, a problem that his career has taught him all too well. Welcome to The Cynical Developer.
It's great to be here, James. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for taking your time out today to come and talk to us. Because there's definitely a bit of a global time issue, I think, between the two of us today.
Yeah, but it's no big deal, and it's really my pleasure to take the time and talk to you and share more about my adventures and more about Rookout.
Yeah, and you've definitely held your fair share of varying jobs over the years from that bio.
Yeah, I've been working both in cyber and in development in general for quite a while. I've started pretty early, and throughout my career, I always felt that software is something that is amazing and can change the way we work. And as I worked on software, I learned that in order to create those amazing changes, we really need to figure out how to build amazing software. And part of that really led me to Rookout.
Yeah. So in the introduction, I touched on the fact that it's a new way to track bugs for online applications, but that's really quite vague. So what is Rookout?
That's a good question. So Rookout is a rapid production debugging solution. We enable developers, dev, and DevOps people to collect and pipeline data from their live production environments in order to understand how their code is behaving. Without needing to restart, redeploy, or write any more code, you can simply press a button and get whichever data you want out of your live systems, from a single variable through metrics to the entire stack. And again, you don't have to restart, you don't have to redeploy. You set points, kind of like breakpoints, except they do not break or impede your production in any way. And again, you get whichever data you want, when you want it, wherever you want it. No friction, no risk, no problems. And it really touches on the challenges working with software at scale.
Sure. So you talked there just at the end about challenges. What problems do you feel that Rookout is solving? Because IDEs can have breakpoints in, you can link up to live code and debug it live, and then we can put issues into trackers like Jira and VSTS. What's different about Rookout?
Great question. So when you think about it, we as developers have been working with software almost the same way for almost 20 years. Think about it, if we go 20 years back, when you deploy a server, it would be on your own box that you build it on, and then it shifted to be in a box next to yours, then moved to the next room, and then to the server farm, then to the cloud, and then into Kubernetes and containers, and now into serverless. And this ongoing madness of increasing scale and orchestration is constantly ongoing and increasing. And at this point in time, when you run software on these solutions, you basically don't know where your software is running. It's no longer one server, but thousands of servers that are constantly fluctuating and changing by those orchestrating systems. And worse, when you're trying to figure out how your code's behaving, today you have no real way of getting visibility into that. It's no longer that one server that you can plug a debugger to and pause the application and collect data from it. In production, you can't pause the system. It's production. Your entire livelihood and company relies on that. So in order to gain that visibility, we really built Rookout to enable developers to work both with applications in production in live environments that can't be stopped or paused, and in cases where scale is really monumental, when you have like thousands of microservices. And Rookout touches exactly on that. We enable developers to access those environments without any friction and gain that data. We replace the existing process that happens today, which basically involves writing more code. It takes hours on average, and it goes something like this. When you want to extract data out of your software, you add a log line or an SDK call. Then you have to go through the build process. Then you go through tests. Then you go through organizational approval. Then you wait for the CI/CD process to deploy your server. You wait for your server to run, and then you wait for the specific part of the code to run that you want data from. And then finally you get your data, at which point you often realize, oh, this isn't exactly the data I wanted. I actually needed that other variable or that other log line. Or worse, because you deployed a new version, you might have added another bug while you're trying to solve that bug. It kind of leads to a situation where people around you are sad. You kind of want to kill yourself, and it's kind of frustrating all in all. Instead of going through all of that with Rookout, again, you just press a button and you get the data you want.
Nice. It sounds really, really good. But
thanks.
Debugging live code, it's something that I've hated doing. It scares the small brown stuff out of me, to put it nicely at times, because debugging live code, it can slow down the production server, it can stop the production server. So you mentioned there that possibly Rookout doesn't do that then.
Yeah, first of all, whenever you're debugging, it's always good to wear your brown pants to work, to cover your basics. But yeah, unfortunately, with things that come to large scale and complexity, it becomes almost impossible to replicate them on your dev or staging environments. You can try to do your best. You can try to take traffic out of your production environment and channel it to your staging, but that also would be a very complex and hard project to do. And as software increases in scale, it really becomes a huge challenge just to get to the point where you can actually see the bug happening. So debugging in live environments, as modern software is growing, is not really something that you can avoid. And so the best thing we can do about it is try to create the right tools to enable developers to have the right pace to work alongside with their software as it's accelerating.
Yeah, so with debugging live code, why would you need to do that? Because for me, I think if you're getting to the point where you've got to debug the code that's in live, I think, is there something else that's in your process that's wrong? So you should be able to check these sort of things in staging with automated testing, with load testing that's done by real people, maybe. Why does live debugging still crop up?
That's a good point to emphasize. So think about it. When you're trying to plan those tests, when you're trying to plan your code, when you're trying to plan logging for your code to collect data for when you run those tests, you're essentially trying to predict the future, which is a daunting task no matter how you flip it. By the way, one of the things that make that task so hard is that often people, and specifically developers, think that they're extremely good at it. That only makes it harder. So because predicting the future is basically impossible, the best thing we can do is try to gradually iterate and build our software and our understanding. Also, think about it. This is how things work in nature all around us. Evolution, for example, doesn't know how to produce the right animal. It iterates locally every time to try to get to the right format. Free markets do the same. Startups do the same. And software development, unfortunately, or unfortunately, is just the same. In order to actually build a situation where you can work well with reality, you can't really predict it. You can only try and iterate and find the best way to understand how it works with reality and constantly adapt it until you have that balance.
Yeah, yeah. The way that the application naturally progresses, it often starts out very simple and becomes more and more complex. And it was something that I was having a discussion with another developer this week about how code becomes more complex, especially when you start looking at doing what currently is the best practice or the good practice of putting more logging into your system to avoid these situations where you've got to debug live code, because you start putting in all these lines of logging, and all of a sudden your classes are doubling in size, tripling in size, and then, like you said, I guess maybe you forgot to log the correct thing, or you're not logging it in quite the right way. So I think without Rookout, I guess you would be left with the only option but to actually debug the live code.
Yeah. Also, logging is a really relevant option when you're trying to work and monitor and understand your software. The problem with logging, in my opinion, is it is kind of a catch-22 situation. When you want to understand how your code is working, you add log lines to it, and then you reach a point that you see, okay, actually the log lines that I've added don't cover the entire situation. So you need to add more log lines, and you change your software when you do that. So you change your software, and now you need to monitor those new changes in your software. Another example for that catch-22 in that area, let's say you deploy a new version. So for that period of time, for let's say 2 months, you want to better monitor that version. So you want to add extra log lines for that. But now you want to reduce those amount of logs. After that piece of code has reached maturity, you don't need so much noise and bandwidth wasted on it. But now to change that, you also need to deploy another version. And you constantly have that conflict between deploying features and deploying monitoring for the features. And you kind of end up chasing your tail. And in general, with data collection, finding balance, finding the point where you're not collecting too much, producing a bad signal to noise ratio, and the other end collecting too little, where you can't really understand and cover most of your cases. Going between those two and finding that equilibrium point where you're collecting just the right amount of data that produces productivity for your application is something that is extremely difficult to do, especially if you don't have a specific experience with this specific app. And you end up having to iterate on that. And what Rookout enables you to do is just to have that process be more agile and faster, to run more quickly through those iterations and get to the results you want essentially faster, and also with less pain and friction on the way, which I think all developers kind of deserve, because building good software is already difficult. We shouldn't suffer too much when we are trying to do that.
Yeah, and putting all that logging in makes the system a little bit confusing. But once, like you said, that the software becomes mature, you want to remove that logging. But that in itself throws up even more problems, because currently you've got one root of the single truth. The system works, you know it works, the login's telling you it's working. You now go in and remove all that logging. If you're being strict about it, that's now a different route through your code than what was there before. So you're not really comparing like for like. And in the process of removing that logging, you could accidentally remove some code that you don't realize, and break your system as well.
Yeah, or even worse, you can change the way developers would understand the code, even just how they read the lines. Building software is a group effort most often, and just keeping sync between people, also keeping sync on how you deploy that software, is a giant challenge. And just reducing friction there is something that is critical today, and will become something that you can't go without in the upcoming few years.
Sure. So does Rookout just give you this ability to debug live code, or is there more to it than that?
So there's essentially a bit more to it. what Rookout enables you to do is to collect and pipeline any data into any platform. So you can say, I want to pick these specific variables, format them into, say, a JSON format, an XML, a log line, or any other format, and deliver it into the existing platforms you're already accustomed to working with. For example, you can drive data into your logging, into Sumo Logic, or into Splunk or other ELK solutions. You can drive data into your APM solutions. You can drive it into your messaging solutions, such as Slack or Office or Microsoft Teams. You can drive it into your alerting solutions, PagerDuty, Opsgenie. Really, you can take the data in any format you want and drive it anywhere you want, and you can do that instantly on demand without having to plan in advance. Usually that part of having to plan in advance is what really slows down data collection projects. You go to your development team and you say, okay, I want to have a new dashboard for visibility for business intelligence or for security or for just monitoring of the stability of our application. And they'll say, okay, we need to build a new platform for that. We need to plan new data collection. We need to create new pipelines. That will take us several weeks, months. With Rookout, you don't really need to worry too much about that. You can literally click a button and you can create a new data flow. And if that data flow isn't good enough, if it doesn't meet your demands, you can change it again with a click of a button, and there's really zero friction or risk when you do that. That really, again, connects to running quicker iterations to figure out what's your equilibrium point to monitoring and collecting data out of your software.
Yeah, sure. So if I wanted to get started with Rookout, do I need to install runtimes or libraries on my servers or my cloud instances or anything like that to actually get going with it?
Yeah, so installing Rookout is pretty simple. It's basically one SDK that you add to your code. So let's just say you're working in Python. That would be adding a dependency, going something like doing a pip install. You do pip install Rookout, and you add the line from Rookout import autostart to your code, and that's it. You're done. You add that to your deployment sequence once, and you don't need to think about it or worry about it ever again. And it works pretty much the same for every other language or framework. It works for all cloud environments. It works for all code execution platforms. It works, for example, for serverless, for AWS Lambda. And by the way, for serverless, we have a really unique offering, because not only in serverless, not only the challenges in debugging production, it's even just debugging your development. Currently, without Rookout, there isn't really any other way to debug AWS Lambdas or any other serverless solution.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of Lambda work with. Let me just turn her off. With Alexa, because all the skills are written in that. But you said there, you mentioned Python, but you said other languages. So, what languages are supported?
Great question. So, Rookout currently supports Python, including 2, 3, and PyPy, JVM, which includes Java, Scala, Clojure, Kotlin, Groovy, etc., and Node.js. And we're gradually adding more languages. I think currently in the works we have Ruby and Go. But as I said, we'll gradually cover almost everything.
Awesome. There's a lot of languages in there, but there's one that wasn't, unfortunately. With being a .NET dev, there's no C#.
Not yet, but it's definitely on our roadmap. The only reason we haven't done .NET yet is that we haven't seen too much request for it. But I really encourage all you .NET guys to come check us out and put your vote in, and we'll have .NET, C#, and other frameworks in that area ready quickly for you.
Awesome. Yeah. So everyone out there that is a .NET dev that wants to use this, go and poke the Rookout website and say, "Oi, give me some .NET love over here. We want some."
Yeah, you can just sign up for our trial and check the box for .NET, and your vote will be tallied.
Okay, cool. Nice and simple then. That's good.
We're all about user experience here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You mentioned there that there was a trial, so I guess there is a fee to use the Rookout platform. Is that the best term for it?
Yeah, we do have a free model and discount for startups upcoming. Maybe this is a good point to give a shout out to people that want to try the freemium model and our startup program. Uh, if you reach out to us and mention that you heard us on the Cynical Developer, we'll get you an early access to those offerings. Um, and but in general, yes, Rookout comes with a basic fee when you're not using our free model, which is based on how many users, how many developers you have working with the product, and how many hosts you're working with. And it's priced per user per month. And it's really easy to start with the product, just having one developer working with it, working on one app, and then gradually grow with it as you need. And we have different pricing tiers for smaller companies and enterprises, adding more support and professional services on top of the basic package.
Oh, cool. And thank you very much for giving the listeners early access if they quote Cynical Developer when they're signing up. That'd be fantastic for them. So
Pleasure.
we've talked about debugging live code with Rookout. Do I need to install something on my machine that I'm developing on to be able to do this debugging? Does it come with its own IDE or something like that?
Yeah, great question. So you don't need to install anything on your machine. You control everything through a web interface. We have an application that really looks and feels like an IDE, giving you both the ability to easily load your sources. By the way, when you load sources, they're only in your front end and don't go through our servers at all. We have a lot of security and compliance awareness built into the product and also in the features that the product provides. For example, the ability to control to completely control where your data flow goes. So as I started to say, you don't need to install anything. You just surf the web, access app.rookout.com, log in, and you have access to the Rookout interface, and you literally add your sources, view the source, and click the line that you want to collect data from, and it will immediately arrive either directly on that front end or at whichever dashboard interface you'd want to channel the data to, including your databases or your logging, etc., as I mentioned before.
Cool. So one of the big alarm bells rang there then that I don't need to install anything on my machine. It's all online, and it's through Rookout.com. I think you said that I get this ability to debug my live code. So is that opening up interfaces into my application to the big wide world for anybody to be able to hook into and start abusing my system?
Great question. So you mentioned a bit of about my background when we started. So most of my background comes from cybersecurity.
Yep.
Same goes for my co-founder Liran and for most people on our team. So you can rest assured that we have all the best practices and best policies for security built into our servers and product. We're also having third parties guarantee it. We're at the process of becoming SOC 2 compliant. We'll probably finish the process in August, and that includes pen testing and policy checks by third parties that are certified to do that. In addition, the product itself comes with a lot of features that enable you to create perimeters around your data flow. When you channel data out of your systems, it doesn't go through our servers. You can have the data sent directly to that final target, which can be within your network, within your VPS, or into a third-party solution in the cloud. On top of that, I'd add that at this point in time, most server development is already done in the cloud in a kind of an open and highly connected manner. Installing our SDK doesn't really change much about it. Think about all the other solutions that you're installing, for example, your logging solutions that also connect your application to SaaS products that connect to your application and collect data from there.
Yeah.
The only difference is that our solution is a bit more flexible, and we give you the direct access.
Yeah, yeah. So the phrase of the month at the moment is GDPR. Now, does Rookout provide any data obfuscation when it's doing any of this debugging, so that you can hide personal identifiable information?
Great question. So this is really one of our greatest upcoming features. So when you're collecting data, you can decide where you're channeling that data. Often with compliance, it's also where you're storing the data that has effect on compliance, especially if you're talking alongside GDPR. You have things like PCI and HIPAA.
Yep.
But as I said, one of our best upcoming features is masking and PII reduction. And you'll be able to mention within the interface which variables, according to regular expressions and filters, you'll be able to mention which variables you want to have filtered out. And we'll also have pre-built templates to filter out social security numbers, credit card numbers, etc.
Yeah, that's really good, because it was something that I raised with one company that I've worked for. When we were looking at this sort of stuff, that they had a login system in some of the applications, and those applications we didn't have the source code for, and we didn't know what it was sending out and where. And I made the point that if at any time there was a crash and the system dumped out its data somewhere, it could be serializing any sort of personal identifiable information, or PII, as it's more commonly known, to these servers, to these third parties that we don't know about. And I think it's something with these sort of systems that people will often overlook, because it's not really on their radar straight away.
So I completely agree. In general, when you're dealing with data and application flow, both security and compliance are really crucial. And that's why we've built a lot of features for that in day one, and why we're having our R&D efforts focus on that currently. And we are really trying to find that right balance between being able to get whatever you want and being able to do that with a calm conscience and being fully relaxed. And even if you give this tool to your, let's say, least trustworthy team member, you know that they won't be able to do any damage or hinder the application or affect the data flow in any harmful way. And having those abilities to trust your tools and the ability to work without friction, I think, is really a critical thing when we are looking at how software is developing and the pace it's growing, and where we need to be as developers to just keep pace.
Yeah, yeah. So, what is the barrier of entry like for this this system? Is it going to be quite a painful thing for developers to come along and put within their application? Is it, can they retrofit it, or is it something that they really need to be looking at from the start?
So deploying this, as I mentioned before, is really easy. It often takes, to start just with a few servers, it usually takes something like 10 minutes. And we do see within our current client deployments a real interesting spectrum. You see guys working with this on really ancient monolithic solutions, and there you gain the value just from the ability to work with all that legacy code that nobody knows how to work with it anymore, because all the developers that built it are gone, and everyone's afraid to just figure out how to access that. With Rookout, you can circumnavigate all those friction points and just cherry pick out the data you want from that monolith. And even with those monstrous things, starting up is really easy. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have all these guys that are working with cutting edge solutions, such as serverless or highly distributed microservices solution. Their pain points are often with just being able to gain grasp on how their software is behaving and being able to find the right point where they want to instrument. And there too, once you add this into your Kubernetes configuration or to your Docker Compose or Ansible script or whatever, or your Lambda configuration, you can really start working with it without having to think too much. One other feature that we have built on top of the user experience in the product, something that is unique to our ID offering that usual IDs don't offer, is the ability to create views and segmentations on top of your software. You can use elements like environment variables, IPs, command line parameters, values of variables in memory to segment your servers into groups. And you can say, you can define a group that will encompass your entire production or your entire system. You can target a specific microservice or a specific application. And by simply going through a drop-down menu, you can switch between those views and collect data from those different layers and segmentations. In addition, this really works well with team collaboration. So when you create a view like that, two developers that are working on the same view will see the same data and same rule collection capability set, and they can coordinate on how they work. And developers that are working on different views, even if they're attributed to the same underlying servers, will see separate data views and separate rules applied. And so you can really mix and match your ability to zoom in, zoom out, and work as a team on software, even when it reaches ridiculous scales.
Sure. So if you've got different developers looking at different things, different workflows, does that mean that that Rookout isn't like hard coded into your application? You're not writing lines like you would write a logger or anything like that?
So the way our underlying technology works is bytecode manipulation. What we do is we inject those capabilities that you want into the code. That's also why one of the reasons why it's really highly performant, because there's nothing running in the background monitoring it. There's nothing polling. We literally add the capabilities that you want into the live code when you need it and only when you need it. And from there, we pipeline the data into the different views you want. So while we do add those capabilities into the code, we give you that additional layer of control to decide which pieces of data go where and which people are allowed to view the data and which people should view the data in which interface at which point. And that ability to really work with all those parameters easily by just going through a few clicks in an online interface and having that conversation with other developers really streamlines that process, even though the underlying mechanics are really affecting or integrating with the software as it's running on the live servers.
Sure. I think there'll be a lot of people out there listening to this now that I think their heads probably just exploded with how this is working, and there'll be people that are out there maybe freaking out that you're injecting code into their system. But either way, I think it's going to be pretty interesting, and they're going to have to go and check this out to see what it's about.
I'll add on top of that people often don't know that, but a lot of technologies that you are using are already doing similar stuff just in a very basic manner. For example, if you're working in Java or in JVM, if you're working with Spring or with Play framework, a lot of those basic capabilities within those frameworks really work using similar techniques. We just took those techniques, really honed them into the ability to work in scale and be highly performant and be fully controlled, and wrap that in a very custom tailored user experience that enables this to work for developer teams and not just be something that you throw out there and sometimes works.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a lot of smart people working on this. A lot smarter than myself, definitely.
We have a lot of great people on our team, and really I'm very excited to come every day to the office and work with these guys because they're really amazing. Each one of them is really a leader in his field in space, and it's really a pleasure to work with those guys. And I also welcome other people that want to join the team. We're always looking for more good people that want to work with other amazing people.
Awesome. So if the listeners wanted to actually get out there and get involved and learn a little bit more about Rookout, maybe start using it, where should they go? Have you got any suggestions?
Yeah, of course. You should go to rookout.com. That's http www.rookout.com. You'll find both links to videos for live demos, recorded demos. You can read more about our security and compliance features. You can read about how the technology works. You can sign up for a free trial. It's really just a click and checking out which environments you want, and you can get started almost immediately. Really, you'll find everything on our domain. Also, if you want to do additional reads, we've had TechCrunch cover us twice, both on when we launched our product initially and when we announced on our support for AWS Lambda. And you're also welcome to just shoot us an email at info@rookout.com if you have any questions, thoughts, ideas on how you want to improve this product or how you want this product to integrate with your software. We're really keen and happy to hear feedback from other developers and people in the space.
Fantastic. So everybody out there listening that is interested in this, definitely get over there and get involved. It's one thing to have a project that you like and a product like this and that you use it and it provides benefit, but having that ability to actually influence where a product is going and the features that it will eventually have is something else, and it's great to see more businesses taking this approach.
Awesome, thank you.
So thank you all for coming on and talking to us about Rookout. It looks to be a pretty impressive piece of software. So I'm quite interested to go and have a tinker around with this and see what I can do with it.
Awesome, you're more than welcome, and really thank you for your time. It was a pleasure and a lot of fun, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, great stuff. And thank you again to everyone out there listening. You've been listening to The Cynical Developer. I'm James Sluddart, and you've been listening to Or Weis talking about Rookout. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website where you can find all the resource links, show notes for each episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, and help The Cynical Developer to reach more developers around the globe.